Tim Parks is a British novelist whose book Europa was shortlisted for the Booker, and his latest novel is entitled Cleaver. He left England because he married an Italian woman, and you talk about the structure of language and place, and you had some success, quote unquote, in terms of awards by being shortlisted for the Booker back in the late 90s.
I've been longlisted for the Booker about 4 times.
Oh, have you? Okay.
Yeah, I mean, the books are always...
How does that make you feel then? You've been longlisted, you've been shortlisted, so in other words, they're recognizing your talent, but have you won a big award?
I won the Somerset Maugham Award, the Trask Award. Yeah, I mean, they're the kind of awards you can win before you're 35, sort of thing. These are the kind of things that cause anxiety kind of pre-40, or maybe pre-45. Last year I was actually judge on a major literary prize in Italy, and it was nice to get confirmation that prizes are ridiculous, because you simply cannot...
Just like the media.
Even with the best will in the world, if you have to read 50 books in a hurry, it does get extremely difficult after you've read 5 or 6 or 7 to remember how good the first one was. You just can't remember. And although it's often easy to put down books quite quickly when you realise that they're simply not prize material, you end up with just a whole range of books that you're floundering about in. It's not like your normal reading where you're coming across an author and saying, yeah, this guy's really speaking to me. Let's be clear about this. There is no such thing as an important literary award.
In terms of them joining the canon.
Right. There have been winners of the Nobel who were very poor writers. One goes back to people like Sholokov and people like that. There have certainly been winners of the Booker who were very poor writers.
So it's more of a political or a marketing thing?
No, well, it obviously is a marketing thing.
Let's say someone who, in your estimation, is not a very good writer won the Booker. So if it's not merit...
Yeah, but wait a minute. Well, I mean, that's my opinion on that writer. Other people may actually genuinely feel that was the best book of the moment. And often at the moment, when you've got tons of stuff thrown at you, it's very difficult to know what is the best book. But the Booker has a shortlist which notoriously has an Englishman, an Irishman, a Scotsman, at least one woman, hopefully two, somebody coloured, somebody... this is clearly a political setup.
It's bullshit. It's got nothing to do with literary.
But it's still not... although, sometimes some really good books have won the prize.
For example?
Coetzee's Disgrace won the prize, which was perhaps the best book that's been written in the last 20 years. A book of extraordinary...
I'm completely in agreement with you.
What? In agreement? Well,
completely. I think he's brilliant.
When he's on form, he's really very, very, very good. I didn't like the recent book so much. But that was a stunning book, and it did win the prize, and you have to take your hat off to it.
Poetry.
But even so, the book is still not as stupid as the Nobel. Now, the Nobel Prize, imagine if you'd never heard of it, and you said... The whole world kneels before a bunch of Swedish professors who read everything in a language which is not their own, okay, who are looking at translations. And so you have to say, well, why? I mean, can we imagine a group of Congolese professors setting up a prize? I mean, why not? I mean, are the Congolese inferior to the Swedish? Is there an inherent racism in the fact that this prize is handed out by a group of Scandinavians?
It's just they got the money. It was because of dynamite, too.
There's loads of money in the world, yeah. But it was originally because of the dynamite. So what you have to say is, why have we accepted this? And I think the desire is, and we go back to individualism here, that we can imagine the free individual writing his book and it's having the same meaning and value all over the world, decontextualized, which is madness, because a book written in the UK is a book that speaks in the chorus of texts around it, right?
Yes, but it's the sign of a classic is that it does transcend
that. It does transcend it, but you can't tell me that Dickens doesn't mean profoundly more in the UK than it means in Japan. Or that Thoreau isn't profoundly... Yes, it influences one thing. And also, many years were allowed to elapse in these things, Whereas now it's like this immediate... Like a book by a guy like Salman Rushdie is being translated before he's finished writing the damn thing, more or less, and often at great speed.
Interesting author, though. whose work has caused him a great deal of anguish, pain.
Yeah, I mean, Rushdie's been treated very badly, obviously. I mean, appallingly by them. I'm not a Rushdie fan. I don't like his work at all.
Not even the latest one I think the editor of the Times Literary Supplement said it was one of his best. Shalimar the Clown. Have you read it?
No, I mean, I wouldn't read Rushdie again. I've read 5 or 6 books. I think I famously wrote the first essay that very seriously contested Rushdie's quality in the New York Review about the ground beneath her feet, which did lead to a lot of trouble for me, let me say.
What kind of trouble?
Yeah, I really shouldn't go into that.
You mean in terms of being blacklisted, or?
I'm not going to go into. Put it like this: it can be difficult criticizing famous people.
It's a chill, libel chill.
No, there's no question of libel because
just a chill of opinion. Then.
I certainly wouldn't write anything ad hominem about anybody. It was a very careful analysis of the books, and really, it was an analysis of this notion, this rather fashionable notion of the hybridization of culture. And I was just asking whether it actually made sense. Let's take the dumbest example. Rushdie writes a book, what's it called, Haroun and the Sea of Stories, in which he imagines stories circulating in a kind of ocean as rich currents of life. And he imagines an evil cult master who wants to kill off stories. And so the idea is that stories of any variety, whether conflicting or not, are always positive, and that your enemy wants to kill creativity and stories altogether. Okay, I mean, I don't think you need to work very hard to see the analogy that Rushdie is setting up there. But if you just look at it, you have to say, actually, that's not the case. You know, the people who've caused immense anguish to Rushdie, and with whom I have absolutely no truck at all, and on that issue, there's simply no question of not supporting him in every possible way. But they also have their stories. You know, they're not without stories. They have very powerful stories. And precisely the nature of stories is to contest each other and of cultures form in opposition to each other. And so the idea that all cultures will sit down together in celebration of each other is actually a misunderstanding of what cultures and stories are, that they are opposition often. And that doesn't mean that I want in some kind of Nietzschean way to start celebrating collisions. But you just have to be aware that your enemy also has a story. And this is why it seems to me that a book like Disgrace, which takes on the same problems of interculturality, is just so much more intelligent. I mean, do you remember when David, the hero of David Lurie, is talking about the black guy whose name I can't remember, who lives in the farm by him, Petrus. And he says, well, you know, Petrus also has a story, and probably a very interesting story. But I don't really want to hear that story in English, because I'm still sure that story only makes sense in his own language. And Coetzee is really there is saying, you know, cultures are separate enchantments, separate worlds, and they do conflict. Well, and that doesn't mean this other guy who in a way is my enemy, it doesn't mean that he's without his story and his justifications, but I have to oppose him, because otherwise I'm going to disappear, you know. It just makes so much more sense to me than this, you know, anybody who's causing trouble is evil and uncreative. Well, they may very well be evil, but let's not... Yeah, well, it does sound... funnily enough, very like, you know, although I'm sure Rushdie's a million miles from George Bush.
The interesting thing with Coetzee is that he wrote a book called Foe, where where Man Friday had no voice.
Yeah, I've read that, yeah.
Yeah, so, I mean, our culture, our society shuts voices down.
Yeah, and funnily enough, there in Rushdie is actually shutting down in Haroun and the Sea of Stories his enemy's voice. He's not allowing him a story. One of the reasons why Coetzee was able to write a book as kind of politically incorrect as Disgrace is precisely because in the past he has a track record of having spoken out so openly against the injustices of the past, you know.
Have you ever written anything that's stirred up as much shit as Rushdie?
Well, no, for heaven's sake. It would be hard, because having no particular reason to write about Islam...
Well, there's other issues, though.
Yeah, but there are very few other people who'll try and get a hitman on you, you know.
But the mafia.
I've written fairly openly about paying bribes in Italy, but the Italians have a way of just pretending that you didn't write it, you know. That's the difference. Is there any other writer in the world today who's caused so much of a stir, and you feel that the stir was caused largely because it was that moment when the Islamic world was moving, or some elements in the Islamic world, which of course is vast and multifarious, no doubt, were learning what propaganda value they could be had from that. I mean, these small-time Danish cartoonists have managed to create an equal amount of stir, doing something that they probably didn't even realize. I mean, if you see those vignettes, we've seen Christ on the cross and passing, witty remarks 8 million times. It's extraordinary that anybody would want to take issue.
Well, Muhammad had a pretty good sense of humour too, apparently. I think he probably would have seen him as a bit of a joke too.
I wouldn't know. I mean, I'm not sufficiently up on Muhammad's sense of humour. I know that he liked young women in old age, and I guess it's hard not to sympathise with that position.
Tim Parks is a British novelist. His book Europa was shortlisted for the Booker, and his latest novel is entitled Cleaver. Best of luck with the book.
Thanks.